Hello, everyone. I'm the executive chef at the Financial Times, as I learned this morning, and it's wonderful to be here with you. And thank you for accommodating the fun shuffling of the schedule that was sponsored by Southeastern Trains this morning. As you heard, I work at the Financial Times. Believe it or not, we're 600 product and tech people working on a bunch of products. It's not just the newspaper on the internet. And I do that 4 days a week. And then to really mix things up, on the 5th day of the week, I have a product leadership coaching business, which I run with my co-founder, Emma, and we work mostly with startups and scale-ups and founders, just to keep things really fresh. Before that, I got to lead product at Monzo, at a South African fintech Yoko, and was early in the days of Gov.uk and Farfetch. So what you're hearing from today is someone who's had pretty diverse experience in terms of the industry, how much regulation is involved, and also the size of the company. So whilst the lessons I'll talk to you about really are situated in the Financial Times' context, I think they're kind of applicable quite broadly. So I guess is everybody a bit over it? Have you all heard these words a bit much by this? Frankly, I'm feeling a bit over it, and I'm somebody who's a proponent for it. It feels like in Ghana's hype cycle, we are full on trough of disillusionment. We are a tiny prime minister showing up to an interview, wearing a shoe that's been a classic since 1949, and making sure we're all over it for a good long while. So why are we going to talk about Gen AI? Why did I suggest that I wanted to talk about this with you today? There's a couple of reasons. The first one's the big one. It is your job. We really, really need informed, thoughtful, skeptical even, curious product managers to be at the forefront of this technology. If you're going to be skeptical, that's absolutely fine, but do it with the knowledge that goes beneath. Going to implement it and be excited about it, also good, but do it with the knowledge that comes beneath the surface. And the reason I say this is I don't think the tech's that ready. This chart over here is a survey that YouGov did, and they were asking people, what do you use ChatGPT for? And right up at the top there is playing around to see what it can do. And so for most people, they haven't built a habit around it, or it being like a constant companion that's reliable, or is it integrated into their workflows and lives? You may be amongst the early adopters, but your average citizen is definitely not engaging with these products. And I think it's because they're not ready. Prompting is something you have to have patience and I guess a little bit of technical, a little bit of magic understanding, but there's not that abstraction layer that makes them simple to interact with. There's a reason that OpenAI and Anthropic have been hiring heavy-hitting CPOs this last month. It's because there's more work to do. Then there's also this. Very good for your health, 1 small rock per day. Large language models are probabilistic systems, not deterministic. And that means they are good for some things, but they are not good at other things they've been using. And as product managers, we need to realize what it's good for and where its limits are. And when we find the limits, don't do what Google did here. So the reason a couple of these came into the press a while ago was because they discovered that the system was referencing satire and not getting it. It was putting the satire in literally. It also told people you could exercise 8 days a week, thanks to an article from The Onion that had gone on to be cited elsewhere. And I'm not really with Google on this one, because they just shut down the referencing of satire. And that felt to me reminiscent of when you go to the airport, you have to put all your, well, in the UK you still do, all your liquids in your little 100ml baggie. And that's because something bad happened once, and so for the rest of time, we're going to stop that one very bad specific thing happening in this very specific way. I also think there's cause for optimism. It's yet to be proven, but I'm really liking the way Anthropic are fine-tuning their assistant Claude with characteristics to make it about the best of humanity so that it can work for a diverse audience. So what they're doing there is asking it to be open and curious and to admit to having points of view or admit to biases so that it doesn't do that kind of under the hood or pretend it doesn't have it. And I really think that's something quite thoughtful and quite interesting. And then finally, there's the terrifyingly good applications where you can generate photorealistic video from a single word or a single image, sentence or image. And this is a still from OpenAI's Sora. So there's this full spectrum of stuff that's super interesting, super dodgy, and super fraught with terror. And I think that we need really good product managers, or we're just going to see a bunch of slop. I think was a word we learned earlier in the day. We're going to see a bunch of slop out there. The second reason is I think our fatigue and all of these things we've talked about here are about where the tech is today. And there's this attributed, I think, to a Canadian skater who had an amazing record. They were like, how do you do it? And he said, I don't skate to where the puck is. I skate to where the puck is going to be. And the interesting thing with this tech is the trend line of change. So that purple line or blue line on the chart starts in 2018 and goes to 10 years later, 2028. And the lines along the side here are telling you how many sort of reasoning problems a model could manage. Here it's a preschooler, elementary schooler, that's GPT-3. GPT-4, smart high schooler, also beating the lawyers at the bar exam. And if you follow that curve in that trend line, just by throwing more compute at the problem, which is that very expensive and unenvironmentally friendly way of training a model with huge processing power, do we end up at artificial general intelligence? Now, this is something that came from someone who was working at OpenAI, who's written a paper about how quickly we get there. Now, whether you believe some of the more extrapolatory claims later in the paper or not, this is a very interesting picture. Didn't know that slide was going to be there, but that's what happens when you change compute from base 4x and 32 times, how much the quality improves. Stacking on top of those blue lines we just saw is algorithmic progress, so efficiencies in the algorithm, them getting better. And the top red one is what he calls unhobbling. And hobbles are the things they tie around a horse's ankles to stop it walking, so it's like this. And he uses the metaphor because the point he's making is that there are latent or hidden capabilities in models. So an example of this might be chain of thought. So if you say to a large language model, tell me whether Jill has 3 apples if Eric took 3 away and Cindy had 4, write down each step in your reasoning. It will perform better, although we're seeing the limits of this now, I guess, it will perform better than if you just ask it to answer straight. And that was something we weren't expecting or we didn't know. It was something we discovered. So that's why I think we should be talking about AI as PMs. And I want to take you through kind of the practical thing of what we did at the FT over the last year and also what we learned. And I think those lessons will hopefully be helpful no matter the company you're at. So let's get started. Early 2023. This is a shot of a really amazing piece by our visual and journalism team that explains the underlying technology from Google, which is the transformer, and kind of shows in a really visual way how it works. If you haven't read it, and if your best explanation of a large language model is it predicts the next word, I would recommend reading this to have the next level of detail. But in 2023, latest to the party, I guess, but for me, I had one job, and that job was to get informed and really, really fast. I'm not like Tech Bro podcast informed, like read the academic papers and bug the machine learning engineer in your team kind of level of informed. And that was really exciting and really interesting. And in doing so, we had an existing user need we were solving for. I wrote this message. I was obviously only halfway through the academic papers because here I'm describing a concept called retrieval augmented generation, and I don't know what it is, first principles, didn't know it had a name. But what this very optimistic PM said was, we could just do this tomorrow. It'll be simple. And so we've got the semantic search capability. So we've vectorized our content. We can find content that is similar in meaning to plain language, down to the level of small segments of content. We've got this user need about understanding the world. I'll talk about that more in a second. We put those things together with an LLM. We have something a bit safer. Because I'm working at an organization where our integrity of our information and the trust really, really matters. So we can't really be using the content that's inherent in the training set in a model. We can only really rely on the FT's own content. So what if we pass a model our own content and only ask it to summarize the things that we've been given? And I was like, this will be straightforward. It was not. It really was not. You will not be surprised to hear. I'm known for being impatient, but this was optimistic even for me. So step one was to put it on an internal interface. If you can't see this at the back of the room, It's basically just a little web thing we have where it's asking what are the trends in the electric vehicle industry. The model is generating a response, and it's doing so based on these segments of FT articles that it found. And the reason we did it internally first was really risk. So we had a lot of people to bring on this journey. Firstly, we're a publisher. There was a lot in the news about our data, which is what we put out in the world in order to get money back in order to be a viable business, being used without consent. We were very scared about putting our data into different large language models when that hadn't been cleared up in the courts yet. And also, we have a newsroom full of people who have very, very strong and good opinions about what quality content looks like and about factual accuracy. So we had a really high bar to get over here. We started off with an internally hosted open source model, and we played around with this, and we got really good. And it was hiding inside, and I was trying out other people's stuff, and I was like, oh, this is better. Like, we've done really, really well here. What's going on? But we got good enough that we got the buy-in. We got the newsroom on board. We got the editor on board. We got the CEO excited. Everyone was like, yeah, this is good. We should put this out into the world. And so we did. We have a lot of legacy tech, so we were being quite opportunistic. We made a standalone web page, and for our FT professional or B2B users, 500 of them received Ask FT, and it says, ask us something, we'll answer you using FT content. Disclaimer, 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 disclaimer. That was a fun one to work through with the legal team. I kind of miss being in FinTech sometimes, so I had my little moment with regulation and contract law, and put it out and asked people, is this useful, is this helpful, and waited for the world to explode. It did not. So this is a close-up of what it looks like today. I have a history over there, so I'm clicking on why is generative AI controversial. The search happens. There's a date range at the top. And one of the things that we realized quite early was when you search for something like, what's the deal with interest rate changes? We have an archive going back far enough that we don't know which decade you're referring to. So the first thing the model has to do is infer the time period. Then we go off and pass a bunch of segments back, ask for it to be summarized, and do a lot of checks on that summary to make sure that it does in fact come from the content that we suggested. And at the very beginning, we do some filtering to make sure you aren't trying to game us or get it to say something stupid. And to be honest, our external users really haven't surpassed our internal users at the difficult questions they've asked so far. And that's what it does. Next up, we're sort of embedding it more contextually, so into users' workflows, into their journeys, to see if it works for them in that way. So it's on the FT itself. And we don't know what comes next because we need to make sure it is actually feasible and valuable enough that people build a habit around it. But we have some ideas about what might happen with it. And the early feedback is really promising. We have here my second favorite piece of user feedback ever. Actually quite impressed. I grew up in South Africa, but I've been here long enough to know that that means very good. And for, it's been a while since the press talked about anything we'd done technically, and they all tried to break it as well, and, they didn't. Please don't take this as a challenge. I'm in some difficult negotiations again about the quality of the model, so don't try ruin it for me, but we did something that was really, really good. And I said earlier that it wasn't simple, and some of that simplicity was about the fact that you change one prompt and the whole thing changes in unpredictable ways, or there's a lot of legal and risk things to overcome. But actually, the hard part wasn't really building the product. The hard part was that we needed to evolve into an organization that could build the product. And that, I guess as a product leader, really was my job, but was a moment and an opportunity. So we've just been through the journey of our first product that we built, starting sort of this time-ish March, May last year. Let's go back to that point, but look at it from an organization perspective. So we're a news organization. There's a lot of AI in the news, so everyone is buzzing about it. It's on our front pages. People are talking about it in the hallways. Our CEO is being stopped at summits. Everyone wants to know. And what Bloomberg go and do. Bloomberg, for those of you who don't know, is a product that a lot of our subscribers use, and arguably in some ways a substitute for the FT. And they have been, I don't know if we just weren't aware or if they kept it under wraps, but they actually built their own model. And it was one of the first models that came out that was tailored to a specific context. So it was a finance model. It could do things that weren't possible at the time, like tell me about the sentiment that's going on around British telecoms. And they've just cut loads of their workforce. If you're an investor, you think, yay, that's great because they'll make more profit and I'll make more profit on my shares. If you're a person who works there, that's really negative. And this model could think about the differences. So everyone was freaking out a bit, and I thought, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for us. So I took that 76-page academic paper, and kudos to Bloomberg for publishing it, and I boiled it down to 2 pages of plain language, which included kind of our assessment of what it meant for us and kind of how we respond. And I put that in front of our CEO and our board, and I was like, this is what it all means. This is what it means in plain language. This is what it is. And the opportunity I'd seen there was, I don't know if you've got these as well, if you're in a big company, but people knocking on the door going, we are an AI transformation consultancy. Apologies to any AI transformation consultants in the room. And we can help you ideate and stay ahead of the, or very, very large, technology companies coming in and sort of our board perhaps assuming we didn't have the skills in the room and then outsourcing it or looking elsewhere. I wanted them to know that we really did have the skills in the building, and it worked. It really, really worked. We started to have credibility, and they started coming to us with opportunities, with questions, with problems and challenges. The next step in my evil plan was a hack day. You wouldn't think a hack day could solve so many problems in one go, but it actually could. So I had a few things on the go. The first one was that we had a little bit of infrastructure powering this internally hosted model, but it hadn't been tested at any scale. The second problem I had was that we had written a generative AI use case policy quite quickly in order to get ahead of what was being used, but it hadn't really been tested when we looked at what our users might want or what our users might need, or the beneficial applications of this technology. We had a clear set of principles from the newsroom about when we would and wouldn't use AI in journalism, but for how we present things, other things, there was this policy. There were a whole bunch of skeptical people in the team, and there were a whole bunch of people with really amazing ideas. So we put together this hack day. Over 100 people participated simultaneously all over the world, and I got the AI editor, who's amazing, to come help us judge it, so I could also get a little bit of sense of what was going on in the newsroom, what people's views were, what they thought was good and not good, and kind of show them how many great ideas were coming out of our team. So as a result of that, we were able to have a really, really positive conversation with risk and legal about how we might want to update the policy, and our infrastructure got much better because the machine learning team were determined this thing wouldn't fail because of them. Then our top 100 leaders, some of these people are household names, they are terrifying and wonderful, were coming together for an offsite. And so I had been hammering on Anthropic's door and sort of gently stalking them because they were overwhelmed with demand and weren't really talking to people, and managed to get access to Claude. And I was interested in doing this because at the time they had a much bigger context window than anyone else was using, which meant we could put a lot more instructions and data into the prompt that we were making. And I really wanted to use them. But all the hoops I would have had to jump through to do that about where our data is stored would have been huge. So we were sort of quietly using it on the down low. And the CEO said, would you do this? And our comms team were amazing. And we ran a workshop where we just made sure that everyone had touched the technology and had understood the limits, had understood what it did well. And that meant I kind of was able to have a much better conversation about being agnostic about which model we use, picking the model that best meets our use case, because until then, there'd been this position that we would only ever have, sounds so naive now, one model, and it would be internally hosted. And of course, the technology is evolving so fast, and we are not equipped to evolve it, that we would always want to use the best tool for our needs, and that was really powerful in doing that. But this is nice. This is some products. It's a hack day. Everyone loves each other. They're all feeling excited, maybe risky. But there were genuinely industry-shifting factors at play for us. IP cases, legislation, that sort of thing. So even before generative AI came along, these are the headwinds that we're facing in media. The first one up here, let's go here, low trust. So there's an Edelman Trust Barometer, surveyed 28 countries. Over half of people don't trust the media and what they read in the media. Let's have a look at news fatigue. There's a lot going on. In order not to be overwhelmed or depressed, 4 out of 10 people, according to Reuters this year, are just opting out, can't read the news anymore. We've all had that moment. I'm seeing nods in the crowd. Change in where people source news from. Over half the world is younger than me, believe it or not. I know I look very youthful. But people are finding news on social platforms. They're engaging more with video, with audio content, trusted referrers, much more so than coming to single organizations. And then finally, margins. Actually, this will be an experiment. How many people in this room pay for a news subscription? Put your hand up if you pay. Okay, you're about double the rest of the UK. 8% of people in the UK pay for news. There's a really, really low willingness to pay. I'd say we're about 15% in this room. And that means that our margins are lower than a tech company. And therefore, our room to invest in technology and product and technology is much more constrained. If you think about the big 5 tech companies, last quarter they made £80 billion in profits, up 30% on the quarter previously. That gives everyone in the UK £1 billion, and you still have change. So it's really, if we position ourselves as in competition with them, that's not going to be a good thing. And then into this mix, let's throw large language models. At one stage, this was a yellow lightning bolt, which I think was probably better. But I think that what happens with large language models is that misinformation and disinformation become much more realistic and much more doable at scale. So that just gets really hard. Change in where people source news. There are now new platforms, new ways of doing it. And the fact that our content is our source of value. I mean, at the FT, it's slightly different for us, but in media generally, these models literally generate words, text, video. I know of one news organization who are using a large language model to generate their horoscopes because it's all rubbish anyway. So there's some stuff going on there. And news is really important. We need truth. It underpins free society. This is Bellingcat. If you don't know them, you should totally follow them. So it feels really, really important. Right. So it's clear we need to do strategy. I'm stealing again from Richard Rumelt, who I completely love, and he says a strategy has 3 parts to it. Diagnosis. Half of strategy is figuring out what the hell is going on. That's particularly hard at the moment because the people making these things don't know what the hell is going on, the legislators don't know what the hell is going on, and we don't know what the hell is going on. Your guiding policy, these are like your constraints or your guardrails that you work within, and coherent action. What are you not going to do? A strategy is not, we're going to dominate the UK market. You have to have a by at the end of that sentence. We are going to dominate the UK market by, and that's about your relative strength and relative position. And so for us, we were like, best do some diagnosis then. And what I'm surprised about, I pulled in lots of diverse voices, a lot of the smart people that we knew around the place, and put together a paper. I'm surprised by how right we were on the what. We were quite wrong on the when. It was a bit slower. And we came up with these kind of 6 hypotheses, sort of boiled down and simplified for you here. But what it meant, when we looked at these, we were like, actually, this is a strength for us. Our position as news that people pay for puts us in a particular position of strength, or the trust that people have in us. Some things were things where it could be an opportunity, but we needed to build a capability or partner or buy one. And some things we were just, okay, this is bad. But rather than bury our heads in the sand, let's take some steps now. So that's our journey so far. Today we literally have dedicated people who teach our team about the ethics in and how to use generative AI for efficiency in their work or in their team. So we have a learning and development function. We've got awesome infrastructure where I can switch models just because I felt like it this morning. We have really good partnerships with companies building those. We have multiple products in development, some of them, many of them built off the underlying work that AskFT did. And it's a completely different world. People seem to like that first product. It's looking good. So what did we learn? First, disruption is an opportunity to lay a path. A company can't keep doing what it's doing and keep doing well. So if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to be in trouble. It's an amazing opportunity to change how you do things. I've set teams up that have been set up in a way we've never had the mandate to before. I've helped change policies and kind of pushed that thing through so it was easier for our teams to build products. And that moment of crisis is an amazing moment to be like, hi, we can help, and we want to do things differently. The second one I probably should have put first because I've been quite surprised at quite how few people have kind of gone under the surface. These are a few of the resources that I've liked over the last year and places that I learned from, but you really be curious, be super informed, know what this stuff is. It's a big deal. And then finally, that if you ship stuff, but you don't do that as part of a coherent plan, it's just not going to cut it when the chips are down. If you have a strategy, but you don't actually ship anything, that's just a LinkedIn post. And I always say to my teams, half of your job is to do it, and the other half is to communicate. You have to build partnerships, you have to do the PR, you have to make it visible and take people on the journey with you. It's got to be all three. If one of these, imagine it like the three-legged stool we sometimes talk about of design, research, and engineering. Sorry, data. They probably get a leg now. It falls over, and I think it has to come on. And what I'm showing you here is our amazing first team who did some amazing design sprints and experiments that brought a lot of people on. That meant when budgets were set for the year, I got money. This one was we literally made OKRs that were about it, and that's one of the tools we're playing around within the newsroom where we're allowing journalists to experiment with prompts and to help each other. So those are my 3 lessons. A lot of unknowns still, we're rolling with it. But the Financial Times is 135 years old, and it's lived on because it's adapted and because it's evolved. And I think because we went through the last year the way we did, we're in with a fighting chance of living, well, at least another 10 years. On my watch after that, I'm probably just going to retire. So yeah, that's it, and a big thank you from me.